Welcome back, friends. I am Dr. Mlelwa from University of Health and Allied Science. I hope this will be the last session in the part of gaseous exchange as we are moving to the part of respiration. So I need just your attention in this part, and I hope it will be very easier for you to understand my session. If it is your first time to visit my channel, if you want to contact me, just use this number. Then don't forget to subscribe, to like, and to share this video. So in today's session, we are going to discuss about myoglobin. Myoglobin, the relationship or the effect of carbon dioxide to hemoglobin, and then the effect of carbon dioxide to hemoglobin, and then we will finish with the gaseous exchange in the plants. So myoglobin is the protein consisting of one globin and the heme group. So it contains one globin and the heme group. So myoglobin is the protein consisting of one globin and heme group that is used to store oxygen in the muscles. So this protein is the one which causes the muscles to appear red. Kwa watu wanasemaga nyama nyekundu, nyama nyekundu, nyama nyekundu, but what we call is nyama nyekundu, it is just myoglobin which causes the meat to appear red. So it is a respiratory pigment in vertebrates. It consists of single polypeptide chain and a single heme group, rather than the four found in hemoglobin. So myoglobin in only one heme group. So a single myoglobin can store only a single molecule of oxygen. This is different from what we see in the hemoglobin. Like fetal hemoglobin, myoglobin has a greater affinity for oxygen than adult hemoglobin, and the dissociation curve therefore is displaced to the left. So if we can see the dissociation curve of myoglobin and the comparison of the dissociation curve of myoglobin and that of hemoglobin, we will see that the dissociation curve of myoglobin is displaced to the left as compared to that of hemoglobin. So sometimes when you are asked to explain about the relationship or the nature of this pigment, it is very important to know how the oxygen dissociation curve appears. Now we are saying that myoglobin occurs in muscles of all vertebrates, where it acted the store of oxygen in a period of extreme exertion, when the supply of oxygen by the blood is insufficient to keep pace with the demand. The oxygen tension of muscle falls to a very low level. So in order for myoglobin to be used, oxygen tension must fall to a very low level. In conditions where the oxygen tension is normal, or in condition where the oxygen tension is not very low, hapo hatutaweza kutumia myoglobin. Myoglobin is used only when the oxygen tension is very low. So at these very low oxygen tensions, myoglobin releases its oxygen to keep the muscle working efficiently. Once exercise have caused, the myoglobin store is replenished from the hemoglobin in the blood. Kwa hiyo myoglobin yeye kwanza anatoa oxygen yake kutumika kwenye muscles tu, lakini kama huyu mtu anafanya exercise, akimaliza tu exercise, pale anavotulia, anatulia sasa, myoglobin inabeba tena oxygen yake toka kwenye hemoglobin ina store. Kwa hiyo myoglobin ni mjanja wa kudai oxygen yake from hemoglobin. So being ready, myoglobin is largely responsible for the red color of meat. Ndio maana nimekwambia hiyo ambao wanasema nyama nyekundu, nyama nyekundu, nyama nyekundu, it is because of the presence of myoglobin. So the breast meat of much poultry is white, as it is made up of the muscle which operate the wings. The breast meat of much poultry is white, as it is made up of the muscles which operate the wings. Kwa hiyo unakuta kwamba ndege wanakuwa na misuli mieupe kwa sababu ile misuli inakuwa ndio ina operate wings, yani mabawa. So as most poultry is non-flying, these muscles are relatively inactive. Most poultry is non-flying. These muscles are relatively inactive. and so have no need of an oxygen storing pigment like myoglobin. By contrast, the breast meat of flighted birds is very dark. It acts as store of oxygen in restoring muscles and only releases it when the supply of oxyhemoglobin have been exhausted. So hizo muscles kuwa very dark, it is because of the presence of myoglobin, na kuwa white ni kwa sababu ya absence of myoglobin. Kwa hiyo unaweza kuona kwa mfano hizo graphs hapo, hizo graphs, hii ndio graph ya myoglobin iko left na hii graph ya hemoglobin iko right. So these graphs are simply explains how the relation or the binding affinity of myoglobin and hemoglobin to oxygen. So hiyo ni kuhusu myoglobin, Now let's see the relationship between carbon monoxide and hemoglobin. Carbon monoxide and hemoglobin. So I hope several times umeshawahi kusikia kwamba mtu akilala kwenye chumba kilichowashwa jiko la mkaa, carbon monoxide itampelekea afe and things like that. And sometimes pengine hukujua the actual mechanism how it happens, kwa sababu maybe in your O-level au kuwahi kufundishwa how hemoglobin is affected by carbon monoxide. Now let's discuss how carbon monoxide affect hemoglobin. Now hemoglobin has a greater affinity for carbon monoxide than it does for oxygen. So the affinity of iron 2 in hemoglobin for carbon monoxide is about 250 times as greater for oxygen. In condition where we have oxygen and carbon monoxide, hemoglobin will bind to carbon monoxide rather than oxygen. Lakini what is the unique characteristics of carbon dioxide now? Carbon monoxide, if it binds with hemoglobin, it will not be released. So it binds firmly. It is not like oxygen, which can bind with hemoglobin at high concentration, and it can be released from hemoglobin at low concentration. But with carbon monoxide, the issue is different. Now, when carbon monoxide is inhaled, even in smaller quantities, it combines with hemoglobin in preference to oxygen to form a stable compound called carboxyhemoglobin. If this happens, oxygen is prevented from combining with the hemoglobin, and therefore the transport of oxygen around the body by blood is no longer possible. So the important point for you to remember here is that the binding of carbon monoxide with hemoglobin forms the compound carboxyhemoglobin, and if this happens, the transport of oxygen around the body it is impossible. Now in humans, collapse follows quickly after exposure to carbon monoxide, and unless the victim is removed from the gas as fixation of air about 0.6 mm of mercury can be lethal. Kwa hata kama concentration ya carbon monoxide ikawa ndogo, lakini huyu mtu kama hajawa removed hapo, sio muda atakufa. So carboxyhemoglobin is a cherry red in color. Na ndio maana kwenye post-mortem analysis tunavyokuwa tunataka kujua huyu mtu amekufa kwa sababu ya nini. Kama kulikuwa kuna moto umewaka, tukitaka kujua kama mtu alikufa kwa sababu ya moto, tunapima the amount of carbon monoxide in blood. But also, hata kama tusipokuwa na amount ya carbon monoxide, we are looking at the skin color. Tukiona skin color imekuwa cherry red, we know that the fact behind it is the death is carbon monoxide poisoning. So carboxyhemoglobin is cherry red color, and this may show in the skin color of a victim kama akiwa ameshakufa. Now removal from the gas must be followed by administering a mixture of almost pure oxygen that contains a small amount of carbon dioxide. Now sometimes mtu anaweza kusema kwamba why tumpe tena oxygen yenye carbon dioxide? Carbon dioxide is important for stimulating the respiratory centers. So the carbon dioxide stimulates the respiratory centers in the medulla, faster breathing result, which help to flush the carbon monoxide out of the lungs. Kwa hiyo carbon dioxide itakayoweka pale itasaidia ku stimulate the respiratory centers in the medulla, kuiambia kwamba respire fast, we need a faster respiration. So pure oxygen is used because the oxygen partial pressure in the air is not sufficient to replace the carbon monoxide attached to the hemoglobin. The two most common sources of carbon monoxide, they are car exhaust fumes and the tobacco smoke. However, at home, the charcoal burner, jiko la mkaa, kama mtu akilala nalo chumbani na katika kulala nalo akawa amefunga madirisha akiwa anafikiria kama labda anaota moto, basi at the end of the day huyo mtu lazima atakufa na carbon monoxide poisoning. Utamkuta asubuhi ana cherry red color, na hamna haja ya kumuita yote kuwa ni mchawi, kwa sababu ni uzembe ambao waliufanya asijue kuwa carbon monoxide itamua. Now we have some few questions here before discussing about the gaseous exchange in plants. The first question is, temperature also affects the dissociation of hemoglobin. Temperature also affects the dissociation of hemoglobin. Bearing in mind the effect of carbon monoxide, bearing in mind the effect of carbon dioxide, suggest what the effect of rise in temperature might be and explain the physiological advantage of the changes. Suggest what the effect of rise in temperature might be and explain the physiological advantage of the changes. So tunachoangalia hapo ni kwamba kama temperature ki increase, what will happen to the oxygen dissociation curve. And our second question is that the oxygen dissociation curve is not the same for all animals. For example, compared with humans, the curve for small mammals is displaced to the right. Suggest why this is the case. Now we have already discussed this in the part of the factors which affect the oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve. For example, for the first question, we said that increase in metabolic rate lead to the increase in temperature, and thus increase the temperature indicated that we have the increase in metabolic rate, and thus the graph is shifted to the right. So increase in metabolic activity increases temperature in a part of the body. This produces a reduction in the affinity of oxygen for hemoglobin and an increased dissociation curve of oxygen. Thus the dissociation curve is shifted to the right. This is physiologically advantageous as more oxygen is derived to the active region. We have already discussed this in part of the factors affecting the oxygen hemoglobin binding affinity. And then for the case of second question, as we said, small mammal, they have the large surface area to volume ratio. So that large surface area to volume ratio will lead them to lose more temperature, and because they lose more temperature, that means they will require high rate of respiration or high rate of metabolism in order to maintain their body temperature. Now small mammals possess a much higher metabolic rate than humans, and therefore it is appropriate that oxygen should be released much more readily. So the graph oxygen dissociation curve for the small mammals will be shifted to the right as compared to that of the human. Our second question again is about the oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve. The oxygen dissociation curve of the fetus is to the left of that of the mother. Suggest why is this so? It is because the affinity of the fetus hemoglobin to oxygen, it is higher as compared to that of the mother. Why this is important for the fetus to take oxygen from the mother's hemoglobin at the placenta. Also, the oxygen dissociation curve of the South American llama, which lives in the high Andes at altitude above a meter above sea level, is located to the left of that of the most other animals. Suggesting why this is so. It is because this mammal lives in the environment where we have a low oxygen tension. So I mean we have a small atmospheric pressure. Having small atmospheric pressure, it would be very difficult for it to take oxygen from the environment, and hence the hemoglobin should increase affinity to oxygen in order to enable the mammal to respire. Without increased affinity of hemoglobin to oxygen, it could be impossible for it to respire. So here we have the answers of the questions. We have the answers. First, about the fetal hemoglobin, as we said, the position of the curve of the fetus relative to that of the mother means that its blood has a greater affinity for oxygen than the maternal blood. This has to be so as the fetus must obtain all of its oxygen from its mother blood at the placenta. So at any given partial pressure of oxygen, the fetal blood will take up oxygen from maternal blood and will always be more saturated with oxygen than the maternal blood. This is just as for the human fetus. Kwa hiyo hivyo ndivyo ambavyo ipo. Lakini for the South American llama, as we said, because it lives in the environment where the oxygen tension is low, so it must have the higher affinity for oxygen. So this means that blood has a higher affinity to oxygen, and thus it is able to combine with it at the low oxygen tension experienced at high altitude. This is another good example of physiological adaptation. As we are going to finish our subtopic of gaseous exchange, let's discuss about the concept of gaseous exchange in plants. In plants, we will not go deeper. We just discuss how the plants they are doing gaseous exchange before we are moving to the part of respiration. So in plants, they use stomata for gaseous exchange. And the stomata, they are posed in the epidermis through which gaseous exchange take place. Now they are found mainly in leaves, but also in stream. So as the plants do not carry out locomotion, their metabolic rate is relatively low compared to that of most animals, and therefore diffusion process is enough for the transportation of gases. So in the plants, we don't discuss any mechanism for the transportation of gases, because the gases they are transported by diffusion. Since plants they are less active, they do not perform metabolism, and I mean they perform metabolism but at a very small rate because they do not require movement. Large trees possess dead xylem tissue at the center of the trunk, and the large branches respiratory gases therefore need only to be conveyed very short distance, and there is no specialized system for transport. Therefore diffusion is sufficient. So hapo tunachokisema ni kwamba respiratory gases therefore need only to be conveyed very short distance, and there is no specialized system for transport. Therefore diffusion is efficient. So diffusion of gases inafanyika by different ways. Kuna nyingine itapita kwenye stomata, lakini pia kuna nyingine ambayo haitapita kwenye stomata moja kwa moja. Let's move to the next page where we can finish our subtopic of gaseous exchange and respiration. So what we are saying ni kwamba plants require oxygen for respiration and carbon dioxide for photosynthesis. So the gas they diffuse into the intercellular spaces of the leaves through the pores, which are normally in the underside of the leaves, which are stomata from the space of, then it will diffuse into the cells that require them. So actually mainly the process of gaseous exchange in plants, it is through stomata. So stomata opening and closing, Tomato opening and closing depends on changes in the toggle of the guard cell. When the water flow into the guard cell by osmosis, the toggle pressure increases and they expand due to the relatively inelastic inner wall of the guard cell. So if you need more details about the gaseous exchange in plants, but it's not a most common question in gaseous exchange and respiration. So this marks the end of our subtopic of gaseous exchange. And the next session we'll start discussing about respiration. And as I told you, if you need these notes, you can visit the Kipaji app, and then you can search for the Dr. Mlelwa Lecturers, and then you can see my notes. So I am inviting you to my channel. This is Dr. Mlelwa Lecturers. If you want to contact me, you can use these numbers, and then don't forget to subscribe, to like this video, and then to share to your fellow students, so that to make sure that they are getting these materials. So in the Kipaji app, the notes will be at very low cost, and I hope everyone will be able to afford them. Thank you, everybody, and let me wish you nice studies.